kupigana nacho mkiki na kitawaramba kitawaramba.
Welcome back, guys. I trust you've been staying safe. Now, just when you think that things can't be worse than they already are, and some people cannot be more evil than they've already proven to be, somebody just comes straight out of the gate and shows you through a very crazy act that the extent to which people can be evil and unempathetic is actually limitless. Today's true crime story is coming to you from Kenya, and it has to do with a Kenyan occult church where it has escalated to the point that so far so good as we speak, over 100 bodies have been exhumed from a forest, presumed to have died from starvation. Not starvation because there was famine or hunger, but starvation because they believed that starvation was going to lead to their salvation. Let me take that again. They were equating starvation and prayers to lead them to salvation, to meet Jesus Christ, according to their alleged pastor, a man by name of Paul McKenzie. This is an ongoing case, and it's going to blow your mind. You would see how people have left their well-paying jobs, educated people have gone out of their way all to just come and follow this man and succumb to these doctrines of his, religious as some might call it. If you are ready for this true crime story, just buckle up and let's go. Since the beginning of time, religion has been a part of humanity. Over the centuries, a lot has been done in the name of religion. Wars have been fought in the name of religion. Wealth has been accumulated in the name of religion. Lives has been lost in the name of religion. And to some extent, some lives have also been saved in the name of religion. But what happens when people emerge proclaiming to be prophets and begin to preach twisted doctrines and lead the masses astray to condemnation, and sometimes at the expense of the loss of their lives? There have been several of such instances. Key amongst them is the Guyana tragedy, amongst others. I'm sure you know a lot. You can leave the ones you know in the comment section. But you would think that this was something that was pertaining in the late 80s, early 90s, and maybe even into the early 2000s. But hardly would one expect that as at 2023, you would still have some of these things happening predominantly in a country that is not obscure, but a country that is actually developing and has caught up with the world to a certain level on some things. And so you have people in there being highly educated, with some of them even working international jobs like air hostesses for international airlines, being able to be indoctrinated to the extent that they succumb to some of these twisted teachings and doctrines. This is what has happened in Kenya, and like I said, the case is still ongoing. Now, it has been tagged as the Kenyan cult killings. It's been given several tags. One of those tags is what I've mentioned, and it's still ongoing. Now, the man at the center of it all is a man who has been tagged as a pastor or a preacher of this church or this cult, and his name is Paul McKenzie Nthenge. Now, originally, Paul McKenzie is alleged to have been a taxi driver who then turned to be a pastor, and then he ended up preaching to his members that in order for them to attain salvation, they had to undergo extreme starvation. So through starvation, they will end up finding salvation. And this has led to their deaths. That is the report out there, but I have a suspicion which I'll put out at the end of this video. I don't think it is all that is being said. I don't think so. I'll put out a theory I have in mind at the end of this video. Now, to the substantive issue. As of today, over 100 bodies have been dug up from several hectares of land owned by this pastor in a forest, and these have been identified as the bodies of members of his church or cult, whichever you choose to call it. But I'll take you to the genesis of this issue, because someone would be wondering, how come that a sovereign country is able to allow this to happen when they have security installations and institutions like the police and even the military, amongst others, and this is able to happen under their watch? I'll break it down so you begin to appreciate how this started and how we got to where we are now. Now, the whole thing started with a tip-off to the police from an undisclosed source that they should go and search this man's forest property because he had acquired several hectares of land in that particular forest. Now, this is not the first time that Paul McKenzie was having to deal with the law. He had dealt with the law in the past. He had been arrested twice and was actually still being investigated. The case was still pending on him being suspected for the deaths of 2 people who were alleged to have been starved and then suffocated to death. So he was already under investigation for some of these heinous crimes, but some way, somehow, he was still walking free and he was able to have the liberty to do all these things. Now, tracing the issue to the roots. So, the police in this month of April 2023 launched a wide-ranging investigation into Paul McKenzie's church called the Good News International Church and its notorious leader, after a tip-off led them to the forest where Paul McKenzie was now using as his base of preaching to his cult members or his church members, whichever you want to call them. Now, upon getting there, the police were surprised to find that there were 15 starving people, and of these 15 people, 4 of them would later die after they were all transported to the hospital to seek medical attention. So the investigation then got critical, because the police realized that what they set out to investigate is actually an understatement compared to what they had come to meet. So they stepped up their game and they expanded their investigation. To that effect, they arrested the suspected cult leader, Paul McKenzie, and then they went to the forest with him, and then they started doing their search. The bodies would now start popping up from various unmarked graves. At a point, the count stood at 51. And then there were instances where they would find unmarked graves with dozens of bodies just buried in them, and they would also find mass graves scattered on this several hectares of land owned by this pastor. So it became obvious that the police had stumbled upon something bigger than what they actually came out to look for. And this case was now gaining international attention. Now, Paul McKenzie, like I said, started not now, but several years ago, to the extent that even as at 2003, when he founded his church, he was able to garner a huge following of up to about 3,000 devotees. And according to him, the objective of his church or movement was to nurture the faithful holistically in all matters of Christian spirituality as we prepare for the second coming of Jesus Christ through teaching and evangelism. This sounds acceptable and understandable until you begin to see people starving in mass graves like this, and you begin to ask yourself, how does this correlate with teaching and evangelism? Well, maybe through the teaching, some people got indoctrinated to this point. Now, he would even go on in 2017 to launch a YouTube channel warning followers against demonic practices like wearing wigs and using mobile money in videos posted to his social media platform. Just 2022, a year ago, this preacher was arrested on charges of radicalization after he was urging children not to attend school because education was not recognized by the Bible. I don't know where he's coming from with this, because we've all read the Bible to an extent, and there are instances of people in there who were tagged as very scholarly and educated. So I don't know where he is coming from with this preaching. But this is one of the problems here in Africa, where somebody will just get up out of the blue and claim that God has called him to come and preach to people and lead a following. This person will come up with doctrines which sometimes all you have to do to confirm or disprove is just read the same Bible this guy is speaking to you from. But some way, somehow, there are some members who would end up just taking everything this person says as fact without bothering to check what the scriptures themselves are saying. So at the end of the day, the indoctrination becomes so easy and to an extent absolute, because common sense is gone, logical reasoning is gone. You're actually made to believe that in issues of spirituality, you have to put your education aside, you have to put your common sense aside, you have to put your logical reasoning aside, because if you don't, you would miss the gift of the spiritual conversation. Well, let me know what you think about that in the comment section. But this is how it was. And 2 years later, after 2017, Paul McKenzie closed the church, and then he moved to the sleepy town of Shakahola, where he now told people that he did that because he got a revelation that the time to call it quits had come. As to where that revelation came from and the authenticity of it, that is between him and whoever gave him the revelation. Now, upon getting to the Shakahola Forest, or the town, he acquired several hectares of land in this town, and then he started using it as his base of operation, where his pastors, he had junior pastors actually, so his pastors were actually helping him to spread the word. And to this point, people started coming to him from near and far to hear him speak. So you begin to wonder what was so exceptional about this man's message that it drew people in like that. But this is where my theory begins to gain root. If you trace some of the people who have been identified, you would see that some of them had their parents as part of the church, and their parents were given key positions in the church, and then these parents brought their kids into the church. So I'm suspecting it was more like a Ponzi scheme sort of a thing, a pyramid worship sort of a thing, where you are in, you have to bring your family members, and then they have to bring their nuclear family. So each one brings one. Because there's a case of this air hostess. I'm going to do a video of her after this one. And she was brought in by her parents, and then her child was also brought in by her parents. To date, they are all missing though. So you begin to see, I think, that there's a pattern going on here. Now, to date, over 100 bodies have been exhumed, and this man is being held for serious questioning. The president of Kenya has also weighed in on the matter, President William Ruto, and this is what he said. He indicated that terrorists use religion to advance their heinous acts, and that people like Mr. Paul McKenzie are using religion to do exactly the same thing. So in effect, it seems more like he is trying to say that Paul McKenzie, to an extent, is a form of terrorist. And I will not argue with him on this. I think I agree with him. But now to the point that I wanted to put across in my theory. First of all, 1, I don't see how over 100 people can just be there in this forest and be praying and be fasting till they die out of starvation because they are going to see their salvation. I think that there is something missing in this analysis. Probably, obviously, they starved, but I don't think they died out of the starvation. I think they starved to a point they got weak, and maybe somebody unalived them or someone took their lives. As to why that is the case, that someone would take their lives, I think that it may end up being connected to money, because there are also rumors of some members selling everything they have and giving it to this pastor. I don't know how true that is because it's yet to be confirmed. But I have a strong belief that there's a motivation in here for this pastor and his fellow leaders of that church or that cult, which goes beyond the spiritual benefit and comes down to the monetary benefit on this earth. I have a strong belief that will come up eventually as this case unfolds. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that could be one of the reasons. So this is how this case has got into. Another right-hand man of Paul McKenzie was also arrested when the police and the military got to the forest. And this is the other funny and suspicious part of the conversation. You are saying that your members died out of starvation, so they will see their salvation, and they've been fasting in this forest and praying with you guys. But when the police found this second-hand man of Paul McKenzie, he was in the forest, knelt down, and he said he was praying with the church members, but they had starved and died. And when asked as to how come he had not yet died and he was not looking like he was starving, he said that he had not started his fasting. He was just praying. So he was going to start his fasting somewhere in June or July. Now my question is, if you are one of the leaders of this cult, you are supposed to show leadership by what? Exactly. Leadership by example. So how come you are watching your members to starve themselves in the name of fasting and then die off to meet their salvation, and you, the leader, you haven't started your fasting yet, you are conveniently just praying? I think this has a whole twist about it, which reeks of a scam. And like I said, I think the end game of this scam is a form of financial benefit, which I'm sure will come out very soon. So I'll be following this case keenly. I'll bring you updates as and when they are available. But if you are watching this video, this is my advice to you. Personally, I believe that God is there for everybody if you want to see Him. Don't go to any place of worship and submit yourself to it entirely such that you lose your logical reasoning and you behave like a puppet or a dummy for people to manipulate. If God didn't want you to think, He wouldn't have given you a brain. I believe He gave us brains to use to think and decipher and digest and understand things that we go through and things that we meet. So don't go anywhere and allow yourself to be treated as if you are dumb and you can't think, and then end up as one of these victims. RIP to these victims. My heart goes out to their families as well, and I have a strong feeling also that the numbers are going to increase. These are several hectares of land in this forest, and it looks like there was the freedom to do whatever they want to do on this space. So I'm sure there will be more graves that are going to be found eventually. Now forensic experts have also come in, so it's a whole mega issue now, and it has gotten a national attention and even international attention, and I'm sure that a lot is going to come up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. It is free, but it helps us to grow. Hit the notification button, share our videos, and hey, keep an eye out. Stay safe and take good care of yourself.